Welcome back to CBS Mornings. We are just about one day exactly, believe it or not, from 20 years since 9/11, a moment that changed this country in a very big way.
Yeah, we're still feeling it.
We are still feeling it. We're going to talk about those changes in this hour, starting with Secretary of State, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. The background, of course, 3,000 Americans died on 9/11, more than that, in fact. And on that day after, Clinton visited Ground Zero in Manhattan. It was a year after she had just been sworn in as New York's junior senator. That was just 8 months earlier. And on 9/11, she said that she hoped the catastrophe would unite the entire civilized world. Former Secretary of State Clinton joins us now. Madam Secretary, good morning to you. I think your hope for a united world came true, if only briefly, and I want to get to where we are today, all these years later. But let's stick with the memories for a moment. You were a new senator in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. When you think back to that day, what stands out to you?
Oh, what stands out is the overwhelming sense of devastation and tragedy. I was on my way to the Senate for a hearing about improving education. Actually, Laura Bush was scheduled to testify when the first plane hit, and after making sure that my entire staff was safe and that they could relocate out of the Capitol area so that we could begin working. I was on the phone endlessly talking with elected officials in the state, obviously people in Washington, and looking at the television like every American was, glued to the scenes of devastation. But I have to tell you that when I went the next day with my colleague, Senator Schumer, we were the only plane in the sky other than fighter jets that were keeping cover over New York and other parts of our country. We landed at LaGuardia. We took a helicopter and we circled over Ground Zero. And I cannot imagine anything that looked more like the gates of hell. I thought I'd be prepared because I'd seen it on TV, but the TV screen contained it. And circling over it was something that I think about and will never forget. But then quickly, we had to support our first responders, other emergency workers who were running toward danger, not away from it. We had to support the families whose loved ones were literally lost in a second. We had so much work to do, and in a way, it kept me going in the face of such overwhelming tragedy. And of course, we were concerned that there might be more attacks elsewhere in our country. Yeah. And really, it's the people who I met that I worked with over those years and still today. I was interviewing some for my podcast that reminded me of the heroism and determination and tenacity. And as you said, the overwhelming sense at that time was of unity. And it really was an incredible moment of the country and the world coming together.
Yeah, Madam Secretary, I don't think unity would be a word that people use to describe America today or the world today. Those attacks changed us in more ways than we can enumerate. If you had to pick one or two, what are the biggest changes to our country, to the world, because of what happened on 9/11?
I think that we have to keep in mind that we did have unity then. It means it's possible, and I would hate to give up on it. But clearly we were changed. Once you've been attacked, as we were, we made some smart moves, some not so smart moves to try to protect ourselves and our friends and allies and people across the globe. We also tried, I think, to show our spirit of resolution and resilience. And as a senator from New York working to rebuild Lower Manhattan, I saw that every single day, how people picked themselves up, how people in the midst of incredible grief and loss figured out how they could keep going. So I keep almost this duality in mind. the tragedy, the devastation, the attacks, what we had to do in the immediate aftermath, some of the decisions that were made, but also the way that it lifted us up. And I know we're in a really divided country right now. I understand that completely. But boy, do I wish that we could be reminded of the courage and the resilience and the tenacity and the unity that we all experienced 20 years ago.
You know, Madam Secretary, we have a new home here on Times Square, and as thrilled as I am to be here, I admit I'm a little nervous sometimes. I'm looking around more than I normally do. And I think a lot of Americans are concerned about a threat risk here in the United States because of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Do you share those concerns?
I think you always have to be vigilant, Gayle, and certainly that unfortunately comes with living in the world as we know it today. But actually, I am more concerned about internal threats. We always have to be aware of and protect against external threats. But what really is tearing our country apart and threatening our democracy is what we saw on January 6th. And I unfortunately have seen so much of that kind of continuing divisiveness and hatred and ideological attitudes about our democracy, about each other. So, yes, we have to be constantly aware of potential damage, attacks, threats from outside. But I think every American, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, should be as worried, if not more right now, about what we're doing to ourselves. You know, we can take anything, we can overcome anything, we can come back from anything if we're united. But if we are going to continue to hate each other, scapegoat each other, try to undermine each other, go after our institutions, our voting system, then we are putting ourselves at great risk. And that's what keeps me up at night these days.
Yeah, you raise a very good point already. There's discussion on whether we should put the barbed wire back up at the Capitol. People aren't thinking about that for no reason.
Yeah.
Make a very good point.
Yeah. And here we are one day
well,
away.
Unfortunately, we've got another gathering at the Capitol that is supposed to take place, and I guess next week. And honestly, every fair-minded American should want the laws enforced and protect our democracy.
Madam Secretary, you made a really good point earlier about how 9/11 was so big. It was really bigger than TV, but we're doing our best here to memorialize it today, 20 years later. Thank you for helping us in that effort.
Thank you. Thank you all.